Hello everyone, I'm Maki. Installing special systems in mobile suits is a common theme in the Gundam series. Scenes in which a system is activated and the compatibility improves are classic, but still really exciting. This time, I'll be explaining the exam system. This system appears in Blue Destiny, a story from the Universal Century timeline. When activated, it displays astonishing compatibility. So, what kind of system is it? In games and other media, it gives the impression of being an energy-consuming system that enables powerful attacks. Let's study it together. Please consider supporting my channel by subscribing for just 99 cents per month. In return, you will receive a name badge and comment stamps. Now, let's begin the analysis. Universal Century 0079. The Principality of Zeon was interested in Newtypes, who were considered to be a new, evolved form of humanity. The Zeon military began researching the potential military applications of Newtypes in order to enhance the combat capabilities of its forces. One of these research organizations was the Flanagan Institute. Led by Dr. Flanagan Rom, this research organization would eventually develop a technology called Psychemu. Dr. Chlust Morses, a member of the Institute, was also analyzing Newtype abilities. He focused his analysis on the actions of Newtype pilots. He concluded that Newtypes sense hostility and begin evasive maneuvers even before weapons are fired. Based on this conclusion, he began working on a system that could detect hostile intent from enemy pilots. Alongside this, he began developing a system that would reflect the piloting skills of Newtype pilots in the behavioral program of a mobile suit. A mobile suit interprets the pilot's commands through a program, converts them into the optimal action for the situation, and carries them out. He considered applying data from Newtype pilots' performance to this program. However, Chlust's research direction was very different from that of the Flanagan Institute. A key feature of the Flanagan Institute was its focus on utilizing the abilities of Newtype pilots. The Psychemu system, which would later be put into practical use, was based on using Newtype brainwaves through Minovsky particles to control weapons such as bits. By contrast, Chlust's approach involved receiving external brainwaves and reproducing Newtype abilities through a program. Due to this difference, his research was met with coldness even within the Flanagan Institute. In the novel version, Chlust expresses his dissatisfaction, saying that those fools did not understand the value of his research. However, one day Chlust met a girl named Marian Welch. Meeting Marian, who possessed genuine Newtype abilities, was a great stroke of luck for Chlust. She actively cooperated in research using the prototype mobile suit YMS-06C. At first, the research seemed to be going extremely smoothly, but before long a strange distortion began to appear. Chlust gradually began to fear the powerful Newtype abilities displayed by Marian. Many of the development staff cheered with joy as Marian shot virtual targets accurately and quickly. But Chlust was afraid, and his face grew paler and paler. Will the Newtypes eventually become enemies of the older humans known as the old types? Just like in the history of evolution, where all the species have been eliminated, will the old types be wiped out? Chlust's heart was filled entirely with fear of Newtypes. Nevertheless, he continued to develop the system. However, the system's purpose secretly began to change. On the surface, the same plans as before were still underway, a system that would detect an enemy's intention to attack and notify the pilot, and a system that would reflect Newtype piloting techniques. However, Chlust also began trying to give the system the ability to eliminate Newtypes. He named the system the exam system in the hope of examination Newtypes. When the exam system detects brainwaves that appear to belong to a Newtype, it exhibits unusual behavior. It forcibly releases the limiters on equipment such as the mobile suit's thermonuclear reactor and thrusters. Mobile suit parts are designed with the assumption that they will operate within a comfortable margin of output. This is similar to how private cars and home appliances operate in the real world. If parts always run at maximum output, they would wear out very quickly. This is why various pieces of equipment in the mobile suit are normally equipped with limiters that prevent excessive stress. Exam forcibly releases these limiters. This enables the mobile suit to significantly enhance its combat capabilities. However, naturally, each part ends up being consumed and worn down at an abnormal speed. Heat dissipation also becomes a problem. There is a risk of the machine shutting down or even exploding due to high heat. However, Chlust's priority is the goal of annihilating Newtypes under any circumstances. The system developed based on this ideology is the exam system. Its primary objective is to kill Newtypes, even if it means disregarding the life of the pilot. The exam system is often misunderstood. Among fans, it is often interpreted as an operating system called the exam system. While this interpretation is not technically incorrect, it is not entirely accurate. The parts installed throughout the mobile suit's body have also been modified to support exam activation. These parts have been given specifications that allow the limiters to be properly released when exam activates. The system is also equipped with a cooling system to dissipate heat properly when exam is activated. The operating system at its core and the body parts that support it are collectively known as the exam system. However, the development of the exam system encountered difficulties. The phenomenon of how Newtypes sense hostility was extremely vague and difficult to define. In order to process such vague information and convert it into something that could be applied to weapons, an extremely advanced computer with enormous computational processing power was required. Chlust spent most of his budget on procuring computing devices. He purchased devices that were among the highest standard of military-grade computing equipment available in the Principality of Zeon. While he succeeded in preparing these devices, the development of the software to be installed on them faced even greater difficulties. Some sources even state that at this point, the research ceased to make any progress whatsoever. However, fortune then smiled on him. During an experiment with Psychomu technology, Marion fell into a state of mental collapse in an accident. As a result, a vast amount of data from Marion's brainwaves was recorded by the connected computing devices. Some sources describe this as Marion's mind or soul being absorbed, but the exact situation isn't clear. As a result of this incident, exam software reached a practical level. With exam support, pilots were able to acquire the ability to sense hostility, albeit only pseudo-acquire it. However, for some reason, this software's data could not be copied. The cause is unknown, but whenever someone tried to copy the data, an error occurred. Consequently, only the 4 computing devices operating at the time of the experiment could be used as the core of the exam system. Chlust requested the Zeon Army to provide a mobile suit that would serve as the base for mounting the exam system. In response, the Efrit was provided, At that time, the Efrit was the Xi'an military's highest performance mobile suit. It isn't clear why the most advanced and highest grade machine of the time was deployed to Chlust, who had been treated coldly. No clear reason is given in any of the available materials. Perhaps the military judged the exam system he had developed to be extremely useful. While the Efrit was high performance, it did not meet Chlust demands. The cooling function, in particular, was problematic. To deal with the enormous heat generated by the operating system at its core, large-scale modifications were necessary. For this reason, the Efrit Kai, which was modified to be equipped with exam, has a larger head than the original machine. The Efrit Kai demonstrated remarkable combat capabilities. This surprised the military. However, Chlust was dissatisfied with this outcome. He believed that it was not powerful enough to counter the threat he expected Newtypes' hostility towards all types. Chlust then had an idea. He turned his attention to the advanced computers operated by the Earth's Federation forces. Compared to the Xi'an military, the Federation forces had made significant advances in computer technology. The learning computer installed in the LX-78 was particularly impressive. As the LX-78 was the Federation forces' highest secret, it was likely that Chlust was unaware of its existence. However, it seems that he was aware that the Federation forces' computer technology greatly surpassed that of the Xi'an military. Chlust's sole objective was the annihilation of Newtypes. Because of this, he was no longer interested in or attached to the hostile relationship between organizations such as the Earth's Federation forces and the Xi'an military. To defeat the Newtypes, Chlust defected to the Earth's Federation government. He offered the completed exam data and the computing devices that formed its core as gifts and began negotiations with the Federation forces. The Federation forces leadership judged the data and theories that Chlust had brought to be useful. This decision was made after careful consideration, as there had been a precedent for this kind of defection, that of Dr. Tren of Wyminovsky. It was therefore decided that the Gym Ground type, the newest mobile suit at the time, would serve as the base unit for equipping exam. However, when it became clear that the Gym Ground type lacked sufficient performance, the Gundam Ground type was provided instead. Furthermore, the Gundam Ground type's internal mechanisms were thoroughly modified in order to equip exam. Chlust also received favorable treatment in this respect. The reason why materials were provided to him with such priority is unknown. No materials contain an explanation for this. Although it is a story that was added later, Gundam Unicorn says that the people in the government of the Earth's Federation have an excessive fear of and hostility towards Newtypes. It would be interesting to interpret this in the context of that setting. Blue Destiny is often said to have been developed based on the Gundam Ground type. However, the internal parts underwent rigorous quality control, with anything that did not meet the required standards being removed. Every part was readjusted to optimate for exam. Some sources even claim that this process took almost as much time and money as creating a new design from scratch. This meant that the exam system that Chlust had envisioned would be realized by the Earth's Federation forces. What effect does the completed exam system have? In the novel, the protagonist Yu Kajima shares his thoughts on its impact. The first unit he piloted was the Blue Destiny Unit 1. When boarding Blue for the first time, Yu was required to wear a normal suit. The first time, He did so was during a scene in which he had to counter a surprise attack by the Xi'an military. The battlefield was an Earth Federation Forces base on Earth. In the Earth Federation Forces, pilots are required to wear a normal suit when boarding a mobile suit. However, this rule only applied in normal circumstances. In emergencies, it was customary to omit the suit in order to prioritize defensive action. Yet she was required to wear a normal suit in a situation where the enemy was right in front of him. He wore the normal suit, wondering whether the base commander had lost his mind. He soon understood the reason for this order, though Blue Destiny, adjusted to be compatible with the exam system, displayed astonishing thrust and mobility. Without the impact protection provided by the normal suit, it would have been difficult to pilot. During his first sortie, the exam system itself did not activate. However, you had a strange experience. He heard a mysterious girl's voice echoing inside his head. Thanks to the girl's warning, you avoided an enemy attack. You also saw him operate wire-guided missiles with astonishing accuracy, hitting the cockpits of enemy mobile suits. The girl strongly rejected the enemy pilots who were hostile towards him. After that, he destroyed the cockpits of the enemy mobile suits one after another and defeated them. Despite the exam system not being activated, you was affected by exam. In another scene, he activates the exam system and goes into battle. When the system activates, he feels that the world has completely changed. Although he is sitting in a cockpit that should be a sealed space cut off from the outside world, he can sense the smell of smoke on the battlefield and the heat of burning armor. He also feels the wind generated when moving Blue Destiny. He also senses the hostility of the enemy more strongly than ever before. Feeling a strong pressure on his back, Yu turns around. He then discovers a Zaku pointing its machine gun at him and preparing to fire. He recognizes the enemy's missile as an unpleasant hand reaching towards him. The next scene is astonishing. Up to this point, Yu has clearly sensed hostility and fought back. However, in the next scene, a nuclear missile is about to be launched from the land battleship Double Death. The situation is the same as in the original 0079 TV anime. Yu recognizes that a powerful hostility resides in the missile. The enemy soldier attempting to carry out the attack is on the bridge of the Double Death. However, Yu senses the hostility in the missile itself. He also accurately recognizes the presence of the nuclear warhead mounted inside it. Just as Admiral Ray did, Yu cuts off the warhead with a beam saber and stops the attack. The exam system recognizes hostility not only from enemy soldiers, but also from inorganic objects. Did Chlust design the exam system with this level of performance in mind? There is no description explaining the exam's behavior in relation to intercepting this nuclear missile. The exam system is infamous for malfunctioning. However, it is incorrect to assume that activating the exam system means it has gone berserk. There are broadly three situations in which the exam system activates. The first is when it detects Newtype sensitive waves. When exam activates in this situation, it will not stop until the target has been annihilated. The pilot's will to fight is ignored and control of the piloting is taken over by exam. Even if the pilot dies, it will not stop. Chlust built this behavior into the system in advance for the purpose of annihilating Newtypes. This behavior is unknown to anyone other than Chlust, but it is within the normal expected range. The second situation is when it detects another mobile suit equipped with the exam system. In the story, Blue Destiny encounters the Efrit Kai and they both activate their exam systems. This is a situation in which it recognizes an exam other than its own as a new type. Opinions may differ on whether this should be considered going berserk. Alternatively, it could be seen as the result of exam achieving an extremely high level of new type imitation technology. The last is unintended system activation. This situation truly counts as going berserk. Exam has even learned the characteristic of new type sensory sensitivity. When it detects strong emotions in others, the system activates involuntarily as if it were infected by fear. Therefore, when exam detects fear, anger or murderous intent in a large number of people, it begins to attack indiscriminately. Exam even perceives its own allies as enemies. It continues attacking in this way until every entity that it has defined as an enemy has been eliminated. This is what it means to go berserk. That concludes the general overview of the exam system. I'm thinking of creating separate videos about the mobile suits equipped with exam. A topic that is often debated among fans is the relationship between the exam system and the NTD system. The two systems have something in common in that they were both developed for the purpose of annihilating new types. There is a book called Master Archive. The books dealing with Unicorn Gundam and Blue Destiny contain an interesting description. It states that Aleph Camera, a mechanic during the Blue Destiny operation, participated in the development of Unicorn Gundam. However, this information should be treated with caution. Although Master Archive is an officially published book, it is released under the premise that it is a book published by journalists in the world of the Universal Century. Although the exact era is unknown, the articles are set in the distant future of the Universal Century and are based on classified information that the Earth's Federation forces have released to the public. Aleph's name appears in the development requirement specification document for Unicorn Gundam that was released to the public. It is unknown whether Aleph actually participated in the development. However, according to official Earth Federation forces information, Aleph did participate, albeit as an engineer in charge. In the final scene of the novel, Aleph retrieves some system data from a Zeon military research facility. Aleph writes a letter to you. In it, he mentions the information he discovered at the Newtype research facility. However, every sentence is extremely vague and just says that it does not feel like something Aleph would write. He usually becomes talkative when the topic turns to technology. The letter also shows signs of having been censored by the military. The information that Aleph witnessed is also briefly described in the Master Archive. It states that the materials discovered by Aleph and the Federation Forces soldiers contained a theory about the threat posed by Newtypes, most of which was filled with Dr. Chlust delusions. After reviewing these materials, the Federation Forces concluded that Dr. Chlust was a delusional madman. However, as I mentioned earlier, this book is based on information released by the Federation Forces to the general public. Not everything written here is necessarily true. Another possibility is also worth considering. It is possible that the Zeon military either removed important materials from the research facility or disposed of them. In other words, the Federation forces were unable to find much valuable information. However, the novel version includes content that challenges this idea. Among the materials Alif discovered was information about the hospital where Marion Welch was hospitalized. Information about the location of a genuine Newtype is extremely important. Why was such information left behind? However, none of the materials provide a clear explanation. Many sources state that the exam system disappeared from the world because Chlust was killed by the Zeon military, and all mobile suits equipped with the system were destroyed. However, if the NTD system was developed based on the exam system, then this information would be incorrect. Ultimately, it is up to each one to decide what they believe. There are also other systems related to exam. I'm thinking of explaining those in separate videos. I hope you look forward to them. Lastly, let's briefly discuss the possibility that Dr. Chlust was obsessed with new types, becoming hostile towards old types. As I mentioned earlier, the Federation government concluded that Dr. Chlust was a delusional madman. However, in Universal Century 00, 79 Schwarzenegger tells his younger sister that all types will eventually have to be annihilated. Later, in Universal Century 0093, he carries out an operation to drop an asteroid onto Earth and annihilate the old types. Is this just a coincidence? It is a historical fact that the Federation forces were secretly developing a system called NTD to annihilate new types. My Dr. Chlust theory had been correct. As he died, the opportunity to solve the mystery was lost forever. That concludes this study. Thank you for watching until the end. I'll see you again in the next video.